Dorpatan seems to have misunderstood what begging the question actually is. God is nowhere in the premise whatever begins to exist has a cause. He's nowhere in the premise, and the conclusion is not assumed in the premise in order to prove it. So this is just a horrible response.
The reason for this video is to provide a refutation to Veritas 48's Kalam Cosmological Argument video, since in that presentation he decided to indirectly insult me by saying one of my critiques to the Kalam was a horrible response. In this argument, I will show not only why the Kalam begs the question, but why it's actually one of the most, if not the most, dishonest arguments for the existence of God ever made. The reason why the Kalam Cosmological Argument, as espoused and promoted by people like William Craig, Veritas 48, Stuart McEwing, and Time to Think Clearly, has been so difficult for atheists to deal with and refute over the years is that it's a dishonest argument. The reason why it's dishonest is rather simple. What the argument is used for by theists is not in the syllogism's premises or conclusion. This is what has made the argument so hard for atheists to handle. The Kalam Cosmological Argument is an argument about cosmogony and the universe's origination being passed off as an argument for God. In order for the Kalam to be an honest argument for the existence of God, it must have in the syllogism's premises what it's trying to prove and conclude with its intent. If its intent is to prove God exists, then the conclusion needed to have been something like, therefore, God exists. Instead, it concludes with, therefore, the universe has a cause. Sorry, that doesn't work. That's dishonest. Indeed, none of the two premises have anything to do with theology at all. Sorry, that's dishonest, and exactly why the argument has been such a vexing one for atheists for so long. We were basically trying to refute an argument for God that really was just an argument for the universe's origination that was being masqueraded as an argument for God. It doesn't take much intelligence to realize how hard of a task that is. It's similar to trying to sell something to a person that never had any intention of buying from you. You basically would be wasting your time and energy on a customer that's not even an honestly potential buyer. Similarly, we had little to no chance to refute the Kalam's premises theistically because the premises and conclusion were not themselves theistic. If you doubt what I say on this, consider that this is the only argument I know of that is supposedly an argument for the existence of God that does not end with such a conclusion. Plantinga's ontological argument ends with the conclusion, therefore an omniscient, omnipotent, and perfectly good being exists. Chris Bolt's transcendental argument ends with the conclusion, therefore God. Indeed, this is so much the case as an honest argument demands. Even all of Dr. William Craig's 5 arguments for God end with either a theistic conclusion or at least with what it's used for being in the syllogism's premises and or conclusion. The only one of the 5 that is not this way is, you guessed it, the Kalam. To give you another example or illustration of how dishonest this is, the Kalam is like me using the well-known syllogism, all men are mortal, Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal, and claiming this syllogism shows that Socrates was gay and is an argument for the gayness of Socrates. No, sorry, the argument only gives you logical support that Socrates is a man and that Socrates is mortal. This is why the Kalam is a dishonest argument. Nothing of what is used for theistically is in the syllogism's premises or conclusion. Sorry, that dog don't hunt. So the argument does nothing for the theist in an honest and forthright manner. For the argument to be of use to the theist and get him where he wants to go, the theist must beg the question with the Kalam. But I want to emphasize strongly that the Kalam cosmological argument begs the question in a covert manner, not overtly. Overtly, the argument is useless to the theist, since it simply gives logical substantiation that the universe had a cause. Its question begging comes about when the theist tries to infer conclusions from the argument. In other words, when the theist tries to use it to prove what he wants to prove. This is question begging because these inferences are not supported by the premises, nor by the attendant argumentation. They are simply assumed to be the case or possibly the case without validation. In other words, they are covertly begged, hence begging the question. The Kalam begs the question covertly by assuming that God is the only thing that exists in the supernatural realm. You know, that aspatial, atemporal, eternal realm where God resides outside the universe. Why is only one God there as opposed to, say, 9 other gods including Brahman and Allah? The Kalam begs the question by assuming the universe is all of space, time, matter, and energy. There is no reason to accept that the universe is by definition all of space-time reality, and I have yet to see attendant argumentation that substantiates this assertion. Indeed, there are several credible dictionaries that define it as everything that exists. This is crucial. If the universe is not all of space-time, matter, and energy, then the theist has no deductive or scientific warrant to posit a being that is atemporal, aspatial, omnipotent, and eternal, otherwise known as God. If a person has credible warrant to define the universe as everything that exists, the Kalam fails totally, since logic and philosophy dictate that the totality of existence cannot be caused, but would exist by the necessity of its own nature as that which contains the sum of existence as a whole. And the totality of existence cannot be caused, as causation presupposes existence. And guess what? Objectivism defines the universe as everything that exists, along with several credible dictionaries. So the Kalam is further refuted because it's built on top of an argument from ignorance. Since if it took the objectivist worldview into account, the universe cannot be caused externally, but would have to be eternal, as the totality of existence is axiomatic. Even though I have just refuted the Kalam 2 times already, the Kalam fails even worse than that. If you take an in-depth look at each of the 2 premises, you will see how bad and dishonest the Kalam really is. The first premise says whatever begins to exist has a cause. Big problems here, Veritas, big problems. That first premise is basically an iteration or a dependency on the law of causality. But if you use a singularity or the Bohr, Vlink, and Guth proof to say that all of space-time, matter, and energy, otherwise known as the natural realm, had an absolute beginning, then the law of causality, which is a natural law, also began. So if this law did not exist at some point as a concept that describes the universal fact of nature, then whatever begins to exist did not require a cause until after the natural realm was created. That's a gigantic problem for the theist, because the only way out of this logical conclusion is to say that the laws of nature deal not just with the natural realm, but all reality. But since you already dishonestly conflated the universe with the natural realm, you have now just made the universe not just all of physical existence, but simply all of existence, period. Since reality is the domain of existence. Whoops, that's no good, because that means it's acausal in total and God becomes superfluous. Looking at the second premise, it says the universe began to exist. That's a problem because it assumes one type of causation that is not substantiated in reality, and the causation it needs that is not substantiated is creation ex nihilo. The universe could have begun to exist, but only in the sense that everything in reality that we know of began to exist, which is a new configuration of pre-existing material. But for that premise to be of any use to the theist, began to exist needs to be from nothing. Whoops, that doesn't work because we have no evidence in reality to prove such a creation. Thus, the Kalam Cosmological Argument is shown to be one of the worst and most dishonest arguments for the existence of God ever made.